Montana Territory. Late spring of 1879, the wind pushed hard across the empty road, and Holden Whitlow reined in his horse when he spotted the figure stumbling along the edge of it, barefoot, with a torn bridal veil tangled in her hair. He dismounted before thinking, boots crunching on dry gravel. "Ma'am?" he called, voice steady but low, like a man not wanting to startle a wounded animal. The woman turned, eyes wide, dressed dirty and dragging in the dust. She looked about 20, maybe a year or two older. Her cheeks were flushed from the sun, and her hands were scraped raw. But it was her eyes, blue, sharp, and stormed over, that held him still. They were the eyes of someone who had been lied to, maybe for years. "Stay back," she said, backing up a step. "I don't need help." "Maybe not," Holden said, keeping his hands where she could see them. "But you're bleeding, and this road's got 50 miles of nothing in both directions." She hesitated, glanced down at her feet, then back at him. "I'm not going back. Not asking you to." He nodded toward his horse. "Name's Holden. You want water? I've got some." She blinked like she had not heard her own name in days. "Brielle," she murmured. "Brielle Langdon." Holden unslung his canteen and held it out. Brielle took it with shaking fingers, drinking slow at first, then faster. She handed it back and looked at him, eyes still guarded. "You a lawman?" "No," he said. "Just a rancher. Heading back from Helena." She looked back down the road where dust still hung in the air like bad history. "They left me there," she said after a moment. "At the altar. Took my dowry and my stepfather's horse. Rode off." Holden's jaw tensed. "You were marrying one of them?" She nodded once. "Only choice I had. Stepfather owed them money. Said it was either marry or—" She stopped. Holden felt something twist in his chest. "You got family?" "Had a mother. She passed 2 winters ago." Her voice wavered, but she steadied it quick. "No one else. I was meant to go with them. But when I ran, they let me." "Sounds like they never meant to keep you," Holden said, voice low. Brielle looked up at him. "They meant to use me. That's all." Holden didn't move closer, just stood there beside her on that lonely road. "Then they do not get to keep your future, too." Her eyes narrowed. "What's that mean?" "It means I've got a spare horse, and a place out west of Three Forks. You can ride with me until you figure what you want next. I do not need saving. I know. Just offering a road that's not behind you." She hesitated. Then slowly she nodded. They rode in silence for a while, the sun dipping low behind the hills. By the time night came, Holden had built a fire just off the trail, and Brielle sat curled in one of his old bedrolls, still wearing the dirted wedding dress. She had not said much since they'd stopped. Holden handed her a tin cup of warmed beans. "You have anyone you trust?" She shook her head. "Not since I was a girl." "Then I'll be straight with you." He met her eyes. "I do not want anything from you. No favors. No promises. You make your own choices from here on." She stared at him, suspicious. "Why help me then?" "Because someone should have, back when it first turned wrong. And because you looked like you'd been lied to too many times." Brielle set the cup down, her hands clenched. "I trusted someone once. He said he would marry me. Then he left in the night, never came back." Holden nodded slowly. "Then I won't say anything I do not mean." She did not say anything for a long time. Then, quiet. "Are you always like this?" Holden looked over. "Like what?" "Truthful." He thought a moment. "I try. Lying's easy. Fixing the damage it leaves behind, that's harder." Brielle looked into the fire. "I am not sure I know how to trust again." "That is your right," Holden said. "You do not owe it to anyone." She did not smile, but her shoulders eased. The next morning they rode into Three Forks. Holden kept them out of sight, took the long way around. He knew men like the ones she had described. They did not like to be embarrassed, and they always came back for what they thought they owned. At the edge of Holden's land, a wide stretch of pasture opened up, framed by cottonwood trees and a low creek that whispered through the grass. A 2-room cabin stood near the fence line, weathered but solid. Brielle looked at it, then at him. "This yours?" "Built it 2 years back," he said, dismounting. "There's a spare bed inside. You can stay as long as you like." She walked slow toward the porch, fingers grazing the wood rail. "What if they come?" "They will not find you here," he said. "And if they do, I will stand in front of you." She turned to look at him. Her eyes were softer now, but still wary. "You do not even know me." "I know enough," he said. "I know you ran instead of becoming something you were not. I know your eyes carry more pain than you should have to hold." She leaned against the post, arms crossed. "And what do you want in return?" "Truth," he said. "Just that. Between us. No more lies." Brielle looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded. That night, the wind was quiet. Inside the cabin, Holden laid out a blanket for himself near the hearth. Brielle sat on the edge of the bed, brushing out her tangled hair. She had washed, dressed in one of his spare shirts and a skirt she found folded in a trunk. Her bruises were fading, but her eyes still held stories she had not told yet. "You were not lying," she said, voice low. "About not wanting anything." He looked over from where he was tying off his bedroll. "No, and if I wanted to leave tomorrow, I would saddle your horse." She studied him. "You are not like other men." "I do not want to be," he said simply. Brielle lay back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling. "Maybe I do not want to run anymore." Holden pulled the blanket over himself and turned onto his side, facing the fire. "Then do not." She said nothing more that night. But in the silence, something settled between them, something new. Not a promise. Not yet. But a beginning. Brielle rose before the sun. The air inside the cabin was cool and still, the fire in the hearth down to its last orange coals. She stood slowly, careful not to wake Holden, and stepped outside barefoot, the grass damp with dew. A mist hung low over the pasture, silvering the fence rails and hiding the far hills like a curtain drawn across the world. She walked to the creek, not for the water but for the quiet. She sat on a low rock, pulled her knees up, and watched the current carry small sticks downstream. A mourning dove called from the cottonwoods, low and lonely. Holden's voice broke the hush, quiet behind her. "Thought I heard someone up." She didn't turn. Couldn't sleep. He stepped closer but didn't sit. "I've got a few hens. They'll need feeding. If you're looking to keep busy." She nodded, eyes still on the water. "I always worked. Stepfather made sure of that." "I don't doubt it," he said. "But here it's not owed." She finally looked up at him. "What do you do when you're not rescuing women from the roadside?" Holden gave a small breath through his nose. "Mostly mend fences and chase strays. Sometimes I trade hides in Virginia City." She studied him. "You ever married?" "No," he said. "Came close once." She had kin back east, didn't want to stay out here. She'd leave on her own? "She did," he said, then added after a pause, "took the dog. Left the skillet." A small huff of breath escaped her, half amusement, half disbelief. "That's cold. I miss the dog more, truth be told." This time she turned to face him fully. "You ever think about trying again?" "Sometimes," he said. "But I don't go looking." She lowered her gaze. "What if it found you anyway?" He crouched beside her, forearms resting on his knees. "Then I'd hope it didn't scare easy." They were quiet for a stretch. A trout jumped downstream, and the sound made her flinch. Holden glanced over. "You expecting someone to ride up?" "I don't know," she said. "I keep listening for hooves." She touched the side of her neck. "He used to grab me here when I wouldn't answer fast enough. Not the man I was supposed to marry, the one who raised me." Holden didn't reach for her. "You don't have to say more." "I want to," she said. "I need someone to know it." He waited. "He wasn't always cruel," she said. "But after my mother died, it got worse." He drank, and then he'd apologize, and I'd believe him. Until I didn't. Holden's voice was steady. "That's not your weight to carry." "It still feels like mine," she said. "I let men make choices for me. I don't want that anymore." "You don't have to," he said. "Not here." She looked at him, really looked, like she was checking whether he meant it. Then she stood, brushing off her skirt. "Show me the hens." They walked back to the cabin together. Holden opened the gate to the pen, and she stepped inside without hesitation. She crouched, scattered feed, and checked the nests. The hens clucked in mild protest, then settled. "You know your way around livestock," he said. Learned from the neighbor woman when I was 12, she said. She had 5 sons and a mean old rooster. Taught me how to wring a neck and keep my fingers. Holden leaned against the post. There's a garden patch if you want it. Needs replanting. Soil's good, just dry. I'd like that, she said. I need something to grow. That afternoon, he brought her a pair of worn gloves and a shovel. Brielle tied her hair back with a strip of cloth and knelt in the dirt, sleeves rolled past her elbows. She didn't ask for help. Holden stayed nearby, sawing down a dead limb from the cottonwood, letting the rhythm of work say what words didn't. Later, when the sun dipped and shadows lengthened, she stood by the creek again, hands streaked with soil. Holden was splitting kindling near the porch when she spoke. I want to stay, she said. Not out of fear. Just, something in me feels still here. He looked up. Then stay. She stepped closer. But I want to earn it. I want to build my place in it. You already are, he said. Bit by bit. She hesitated, then reached for his hand. Her fingers were rough from work and his were calloused from years of the same. They fit without ceremony. He didn't speak. He just held her hand while the light faded. And for the first time in a long while, Brielle didn't feel like she was waiting for something to go wrong. The wind carried the scent of wet earth across the yard as a light rain moved off toward the distant hills. Brielle stood beneath the cabin's overhang, sleeves damp, watching the clouds shift and scatter. Her hair had dried in waves from the drizzle, and her skirt clung to her calves where she'd walked the garden rows, checking for sprouts. Holden came around from the north side of the barn, sleeves rolled, a coil of rope slung over one shoulder. You always this steady after a storm? She asked without turning. I've seen worse skies, he replied, brushing mud from his trousers. Storm's not what unsettles me. It's what follows that can be harder. She glanced over. What do you mean? He leaned against the post beside her, arms crossed. After my brother died, I thought I'd never stop waiting for the next bad thing. Got so used to holding my breath, I forgot how to let it out. Brielle studied his face. You never mentioned a brother. I don't mention a lot, he said. But you asked. She stepped off the porch, boots squelching in the soft earth. What happened to him? Railroad work outside Butte, he said. Rockslide caught him. They said he didn't suffer, but they always say that. She didn't speak for a moment. Then, what was his name? Elias. He was younger by 2 years, but folks always thought he was older. He had that look like he'd lived twice already. You miss him. Every day, Holden said. But mostly in the quiet. She walked beside him toward the fence line where the grass grew taller. I never had a sibling. I used to wish for one, back when I still believed things could be wished into being. They reached the creek bend where she'd started laying flat stones to edge a path. Brielle crouched and picked one up, brushed the mud from its surface. I've been thinking about staying through winter, she said. If that's something you'd allow. I don't own your time, he said. But I'd like you here. She placed the stone with the others, fitting it into the curve. I'll need to trade for wool and oilcloth come fall. I can sew well enough. Maybe I could make things to sell. We can ride to Gallatin next week, he said. I've got a few pelts to bring. You can see what the town offers. Brielle stood, wiped her hands on her skirt. I don't want to be dependent on kindness. Holden's brow furrowed. I'm not being kind, Brielle. I'm being fair. You work harder than most. You carry your weight. She looked up at him then. You ever think about what it'd be like to have someone? Not just for a season, but for the long part of life. He held her gaze. I've thought about it more in the past few weeks than I had in the last 10 years. She stepped closer, arms loose at her sides. I'm not ready to say what this is yet. But when I wake up and see you boiling coffee before the sun's up, it feels like something I could trust. His voice softened. You don't have to name it. Just stay in it. They stood in the hush near the creek, the sound of water rolling over stone. She reached for his hand and he took it. There was no need to press forward with words. The way their fingers met said enough for now. That evening, Brielle boiled potatoes and chopped dandelion greens she'd foraged from the far field. She moved around the small kitchen space with quiet purpose, sleeves pinned back, apron tied at the waist. Holden brought in firewood and set it near the hearth, glancing now and again at her as if trying to memorize the shape of her moving through the room. Over supper, she asked, Do you want children someday? He chewed slowly before answering. Only if the woman I love wants them too. She nodded. I used to think I didn't, but that was before I knew what a true home could feel like. Holden watched her fingers wrap around the tin cup. You think you might want one here, with me? She didn't look away. I think I might. He reached across the table, not touching her hand, just resting his near enough she could if she chose. I won't rush you, he said, but I'll wait as long as it takes. She placed her hand over his. You won't have to. Outside, the clouds had cleared. Moonlight stretched long over the fields, and inside the cabin, the fire burned low. They sat together in the quiet, no need to fill it. And for the first time, neither of them felt alone in the stillness. By early June, the cottonwoods rustled with full leaves and the earth held the scent of warmed sap and sunlit grass. Brielle woke to the sound of Holden's boots on the porch, his step steady, not hurried. She rose, pulled her shawl around her shoulders, and met him outside. Fence lines down near the south pasture, he said. Cattle wander if I don't patch it. She nodded. I'll bring you bread and cold coffee mid-morning. You want me to carry anything out? Holden shook his head. Just yourself when you're ready. She watched him ride off, the gelding's hooves muffled in the damp grass, then turned toward the garden. The first shoots were pushing through beans, carrots, and a few stubborn onions. She knelt and worked the dirt loose around them, careful with each root. Her hands had thickened some in the past weeks, less softness now, but more certainty. Later, she packed the bread in a cloth, poured the coffee into the lidded tin, and walked the trail past the barn and through the tall grass where the fence sagged in a crooked line. Holden was already knee-deep in the creek, hauling a post upright. His shirt stuck to his back, and his hat had slipped low over his brow. You'll wear yourself out before noon, she said, laying the bundle on a flat rock. Holden pushed the post into the mud and leaned on it. Wouldn't be the first time. She poured the coffee into the tin cup and handed it over. You ever think about hiring someone to help? Thought about it, he said, taking a sip. But most don't stay more than a season. And I'd rather run short-handed than bring in someone I can't trust. Brielle sat on the grass, knees drawn up. What would I do if I wasn't here? He looked over. You ever picture it? She nodded. Sometimes I imagine a boarding house. Not in a town, but near enough to one. Clean sheets. Meals made with care. A place for women who need to stop for more than just a night. Holden crouched beside her. You'd be good at that. I'd be fair, she said. I know what it feels like to have nowhere. He set the cup down. You want to build the here, you could. She narrowed her eyes. You mean on your land? I mean on our land, he said. If that's something you'd want. She blinked, mouth parting slightly, then slowly said, You'd give me half? I'd give you all if you asked, he said, voice even. But half seems right if we're building something that'll last. She looked away toward the hills. I never thought I'd hear a man say that with no strings tied to it. Holden didn't reach for her. I meant what I said when we met. I want truth between us. Not ownership. Her voice shook just a little. Then here's mine, I want to stay. I want to build that place. And I want you beside me while I do. He nodded once, slow and sure. Then we'll start clearing the back acre tomorrow. It's got the best light. She smiled, not wide, but real. That evening, after Holden finished hauling the last of the fence boards, he found her near the garden, arranging smooth river stones into a low border. She stood when he approached, brushing dirt from her hands. I've been thinking, she said, about the wedding veil. The one I ran with. Holden tilted his head. You want to burn it? I want to bury it, she said. Deep, with nothing to mark it. I don't need reminders. He walked with her to the creek bank, where the earth was soft. She pulled the veil from the small trunk where she'd stowed it, folded tight. Together, they dug a hole beneath the cottonwood's roots. She placed the fabric inside, her fingers steady. It was never mine, not really. He covered it with dirt, patted it firm, then leaned on the spade. You ever want a new one, sewn for yourself this time? I'll write to every trading post until I find the cloth you like. She looked at him, eyes shining faintly in the dusk. I don't need a veil, but I'd like a dress I chose myself. And I'd like you waiting at the end of the walk. I'll be there, he said. They stood in silence as the first stars emerged. No wind, just the sound of the creek slipping past the roots. She reached for his hand, and this time there was no hesitation. He laced his fingers with hers, and the weight of the past loosened just a little more. Tomorrow there would be plans and timber to haul, and a stretch of land to shape into something new. But tonight they stood together, two people who had finally stopped running. The clearing behind the cabin had been nothing but scrub and wild rye when they began. Now, after weeks of work under sun and wind and the occasional hush of midday rain, it held the bones of something new. Flat stones marked the outline of a structure not yet raised but fully imagined. Holden set the last cedar post while Brielle steadied the level across its top. Her hair tied with a strip of blue cotton she dyed herself from wild berries. "You think it'll hold square?" she asked, brushing a streak of sawdust from her cheek. Holden stepped back, eyeing the frame. "Won't know until the roof goes on. But it's truer than most I've seen." She nodded, satisfied. "I'll start the ledger for supplies this afternoon. I don't want to owe anyone come winter." "You won't," he said. "Whatever we build clean." She touched the corner post, fingers lingering on the smooth grain. "I want the back room to have 2 windows, for light, and a door that locks from inside." Holden didn't question it. "We'll cut the sills for them tomorrow." They left the tools where they were and walked in silence to the cabin. Inside, she boiled water for washing, while he mended a split in the saddle leather. The sounds of their shared life had settled into a rhythm, knife against hide, kettle lid rattling, the occasional call of a raven from the field beyond. Later, as the sky dimmed to that particular soft violet that only came in early summer, she sat on the front step with a square of muslin in her lap, stitching careful seams. Holden joined her, wiping his hands on a cloth. "I sent a letter to the circuit judge," she said, not looking up. "Asked about filing a land partnership. Equal claim, official and sealed." He nodded once, slow. "You want it on paper?" "I do. I'll sign it when it comes." She paused, needle still. "It's not that I don't trust you." "I know," he said. "It's that you want to be able to trust yourself." She looked over then, eyes steady. "And I do. More than I ever thought I could." He reached for her hand, calloused and warm, and curled his fingers around hers. "You've built something here. Not just walls and gardens. You've changed the shape of the quiet." "I didn't do it alone," she said. "No," he said, "but you led the way." The next morning they rode to Gallatin. The trail was long but familiar, and the two of them moved easily, side by side. In town, Brielle traded a bolt of homespun for window glass and bartered a jar of dried mint for 2 iron hinges. She spoke with the cooper's wife about hiring 2 hands to help raise the frame in August. They'd need strong backs, but not many. The place wasn't meant to be large, just enough for rest and bread and safety. Back at the ranch, they took turns boiling water for washing, and he helped her scrub the dust from her skirt hem. She laughed when he splashed her by mistake, and he didn't pretend it hadn't been on purpose. That night, under a sky so clear it seemed made new, Brielle stood barefoot on the porch while Holden finished locking the barn. When he returned, she held something in her palm, a small ring, carved from bone and etched with a simple braid. "I made it from the antler you found near the north field," she said. "Thought it'd last longer than gold." He opened his hand, and she placed it there. "You want to marry me, Brielle Langdon?" "I do," she said, "but only if I get to keep my name." He smiled, slow and sure. "That's the name I fell in love with." They said their vows beneath the cottonwoods 2 days later. Just the two of them and the judge who came through twice a season. No guests, no paper flowers. Just a promise spoken clear and without haste, and a kiss that followed not out of ceremony but certainty. Afterward, Holden lifted her hand to his chest and held it there. "You're the first thing I've ever built that made me proud." She leaned into him, her voice quiet. "You're the first thing that ever felt like home." By the time the leaves turned gold, the back acre held a tidy structure with a tin roof and clean windows. Brielle opened the door to a woman with a baby and a bruised cheek one late afternoon, and welcomed her in with warm broth and a clean bed. Holden stacked firewood without comment, but later, when they lay side by side, he turned to her and said, "You did it. You made a place for the ones who need it. She rested her head on his shoulder. So did you. They never spoke of the veil again. It stayed buried beneath the cottonwood, and no one passing by would have known it had ever been there. But every spring, a patch of bluebells bloomed above it, wild and wide open to the sun. Brielle kept the ledger by the hearth, but it grew thin with time. Fewer deaths, more births, girls who stayed through the season and left with seed packets and soft shoes. Holden taught a boy to shoe a horse, and Brielle taught a girl to read by candlelight. Years passed, but the cabin never lost its quiet strength. Nor did the two who lived there lose each other. They grew silver together, not suddenly, but strand by strand, and each new morning found them side by side, still building, still choosing. And when the wind rose across the fields, it carried no sorrow with it. Only the sound of a door gently closing, and two voices speaking low, steady, and full of light.